It was a bright morning as the first-class passengers of a luxurious flight boarded the plane. Among them was none other than the Hollywood legend, Keanu Reeves. He quietly walked down the aisle, his simple black jacket blending perfectly with the classy atmosphere of the cabin. With his trademark calm and unassuming demeanor, he settled into his seat. The other passengers were busy with their own activities, but one, a young businessman named Jack, couldn't help but notice the actor. He had always been a huge fan of Keanu's movies, but what Jack didn't know was that Keanu was not one to be fawned over. Jack, who was sitting just a few rows away, took a quick glance at Keanu. His mind began to race with thoughts of how he could impress the star. Without thinking much of it, Jack decided to make a bold move. He turned to his travel companion and smirked, saying loudly enough for Keanu to hear, "Isn't it funny? People think that just because someone's famous, they deserve special treatment. Look at that guy. He's just a regular person like everyone else." Keanu didn't react at first. He simply stared out of the window, lost in his own thoughts. Jack, still eager for attention, raised his voice a bit more, hoping to get a reaction. "I bet he doesn't even appreciate all the luxury. Just because he's in movies doesn't mean he's a better person than any of us." The words hung in the air, but Keanu stayed silent. Jack's attempt to show off to his companion seemed to fail. Little did he know, his comments would soon lead to a lesson he would never forget. As the plane taxied down the runway, the cabin grew quiet. Most passengers settled into their seats, adjusting for the long journey ahead. Jack, however, couldn't let go of his need for attention. He leaned toward his companion, making another loud remark. "I wonder if celebrities like him even have any real talents outside of acting. Bet he doesn't even know what hard work is." Several passengers glanced in Jack's direction, their expressions a mix of curiosity and discomfort. It wasn't every day that someone spoke so openly about a celebrity within earshot. Keanu, though, remained calm. He seemed unaffected, his focus on the clouds forming outside the window. Jack noticed Keanu's lack of reaction and mistook it for indifference. Smirking, he whispered just loud enough for others to hear, "See? He doesn't even defend himself. Typical Hollywood type. They think ignoring people makes them better than us." His companion gave a half-hearted chuckle, clearly embarrassed by Jack's behavior but unsure how to respond. A flight attendant walked by, politely offering drinks to the passengers. When she reached Keanu, she smiled warmly. "Good afternoon, Mr. Reeves. It's an honor to have you aboard." Her genuine admiration was clear. Keanu returned the smile, his voice soft but kind. "Thank you. It's a pleasure to be here." The moment was brief, but it struck a chord with the passengers nearby. Jack shifted uncomfortably in his seat. He could feel the subtle judgment in the air, as if the other travelers were silently questioning his earlier comments. Still, his pride wouldn't let him stop. Unbeknownst to Jack, a storm was brewing. Not in the skies outside, but within the cabin. The truth about Keanu Reeves and the humility that defined him was about to unfold in a way that would leave Jack speechless. As the flight reached cruising altitude, the flight attendants began serving lunch. The clinking of silverware and quiet chatter filled the cabin. Keanu Reeves, ever humble, declined the first-class champagne and ordered a simple glass of water. His actions didn't go unnoticed by the passengers, who were starting to admire his down-to-earth nature. Across the aisle, an elderly woman struggled with her tray. Her hands trembled as she tried to open the packet of butter that came with her meal. The attendants were busy, and no one nearby seemed to notice. No one, that is, except Keanu. He immediately rose from his seat, walked over to her, and gently helped open the packet. "Thank you, young man," the woman said with a warm smile. "You're very kind." Keanu nodded politely, saying, "It's no trouble at all. Enjoy your meal." The exchange was brief but powerful. Passengers who witnessed the moment felt a surge of respect for the actor. Jack, however, rolled his eyes. "What a show-off," he muttered under his breath. "He's just trying to look good for everyone." But Jack's companion was beginning to see things differently. "Maybe he's just a good person," she said quietly. "Not everything's about showing off, you know." Her words stung a little, but Jack shrugged them off. He still believed he was right. As Keanu returned to his seat, he noticed a young boy a few rows ahead staring at him with wide eyes. The boy whispered something to his mother, who nodded encouragingly. Gathering his courage, the boy approached Keanu, holding out a small notebook. "Excuse me," the boy said shyly. "I'm a big fan. Can I have your autograph?" Keanu smiled warmly and took the notebook. "Of course," he said. He signed it with care, even adding a little note. "Always be kind. Keanu." The boy beamed with joy and ran back to his seat. Jack watched the interaction with narrowed eyes. He couldn't understand why everyone was so impressed. To him, Keanu was just another celebrity basking in attention. But the truth, as Jack was about to learn, was far more profound. Hours passed, and the flight settled into a comfortable rhythm. Some passengers watched movies, while others chatted softly or napped. Jack, however, couldn't let go of his irritation. His companion had grown quiet, clearly embarrassed by his earlier behavior, but Jack remained determined to prove that celebrities like Keanu didn't deserve the admiration they received. Then, a commotion broke out near the back of the cabin. A middle-aged man, seated with his young daughter, began to panic. His voice, filled with worry, echoed through the plane. "She's not breathing properly. Someone help." The flight attendants rushed over, but their training could only take them so far. The little girl's face had turned pale, and her breaths were shallow. Passengers murmured in concern, unsure of how to help. Without hesitation, Keanu stood up and walked over to the family. His calm presence seemed to bring a sense of control to the chaos. "I'm trained in basic first aid," he said to the attendants. "May I?" The father nodded desperately, and Keanu knelt beside the girl. He checked her pulse, spoke to her softly, and instructed the attendants to bring oxygen. His steady hands and reassuring words helped stabilize the girl until the emergency passed. Passengers watched in awe. This wasn't the behavior of a self-absorbed celebrity. Keanu had stepped forward when it mattered most, showing genuine concern for a stranger in need. Even Jack, for the first time, was silent. The girl's breathing gradually returned to normal, and her father's tears of relief were evident. "Thank you," the man said, his voice trembling. "You saved her life." Keanu shook his head modestly. "I just did what anyone should do. I'm glad she's okay." As Keanu returned to his seat, the cabin erupted into quiet applause. The moment was humbling, and it left an undeniable impact on everyone who witnessed it, especially Jack, whose smugness was beginning to crumble. Jack slumped in his seat, arms crossed tightly. The atmosphere in the cabin had shifted, with passengers now exchanging whispers of admiration for Keanu. Jack could hear snippets of their conversations. "What a kind man. He's so down to earth. Not what you'd expect from a celebrity." Jack's companion turned to him with a knowing look. "Still think he's just a show-off?" she asked, her voice tinged with sarcasm. Jack clenched his jaw but didn't respond. For the first time, he wasn't sure how to defend his earlier remarks. As the flight continued, Keanu remained his unassuming self. He read a book quietly, occasionally offering kind words to the flight attendants or engaging in polite conversation with the elderly woman he had helped earlier. Each small act of kindness chipped away at Jack's assumptions, leaving him increasingly uneasy. Desperate to reclaim his sense of superiority, Jack leaned over to his companion and whispered, "You'll see. He's just playing a role. Nobody's that perfect in real life." But even as he spoke, the words felt hollow. Deep down, Jack knew he was grasping at straws. Meanwhile, the other passengers continued to warm to Keanu's quiet charm. He wasn't trying to impress anyone. He simply treated everyone with respect and kindness. The more Jack observed, the harder it became to ignore the truth. By the time the flight attendants announced their descent, Jack was struggling with an unfamiliar feeling: guilt. He had spent the entire flight judging someone who had done nothing but prove himself to be a genuinely good person, and he wasn't ready to admit it yet. The plane began its descent, and the passengers adjusted their seats in preparation for landing. Jack, now visibly uncomfortable, avoided eye contact with anyone. His earlier confidence had faded, replaced by a growing sense of unease. His companion, tired of his stubbornness, turned her attention to a magazine, leaving him to stew in silence. Keanu, on the other hand, remained composed. As the plane tilted slightly, An attendant passed by to check seatbelts. She stopped by Keanu's seat, smiled warmly, and whispered something to him. Jack, straining to eavesdrop, caught only fragments of their conversation. After the attendant moved on, Keanu turned to face Jack directly. His eyes were calm but sharp, and his voice carried a quiet authority. "You seem like someone with strong opinions," Keanu said, breaking the silence between them. Jack was caught off guard. He stammered, unsure of how to respond. I didn't mean anything by it," he said quickly, his usual bravado nowhere to be found. Keanu nodded, his expression kind yet firm. "That's okay," he said. "Everyone has their own perspective, but sometimes it's worth asking ourselves why we hold certain opinions about people we've never met." The words hit Jack harder than he expected. He opened his mouth to reply, but found himself at a loss. For the first time, he felt exposed, as if Keanu could see straight through his facade. The rest of the descent was quiet, but Jack couldn't stop replaying Keanu's words in his mind. Something about the actor's calm demeanor and gentle wisdom had struck a nerve. Jack didn't want to admit it, but he was starting to regret his earlier comments. When the plane landed, passengers began gathering their belongings. Jack moved quickly, eager to leave the cabin and escape the weight of his guilt. But as he reached for his bag in the overhead compartment, he noticed something unusual. A small group of passengers had gathered near Keanu's seat, each of them expressing their admiration and gratitude. The elderly woman who had struggled with her tray, the father whose daughter Keanu had helped, and even a few flight attendants were there. One by one, they shared their words of thanks. The elderly woman held his hand and said, "It's rare to meet someone so thoughtful. Thank you for your kindness." The father added, "You didn't have to help, but you did. My daughter is safe because of you." Keanu listened to each of them with genuine humility, never once acting as if he deserved the praise. "It was nothing," he said softly, "just trying to do the right thing." Jack stood frozen, his bag still in his hand. Watching the scene unfold, he felt a pang of shame. This was no show-off. Keanu Reeves was everything Jack wasn't: humble, kind, and selfless. As the group dispersed, Jack's companion nudged him. "Maybe you should say something," she whispered. Jack hesitated, but deep down, he knew she was right. Jack took a deep breath and approached Keanu, who was now standing quietly, waiting to exit the plane. Mr. Reeves?" Jack began, his voice faltering. Keanu turned to him, his expression as calm as ever. "I just wanted to say," Jack paused, struggling to find the right words. "I wasn't fair to you earlier. I made assumptions, and I said things I shouldn't have. I'm sorry." Keanu studied him for a moment, then smiled warmly. "It takes courage to apologize," he said. "Thank you." Jack was stunned. He had expected a polite but distant response, not the genuine kindness he received. "You're a better person than I thought," Jack admitted. "I've learned a lot today." Keanu nodded, his voice steady. "We all make mistakes. What matters is what we do afterward." The words stayed with Jack as he walked off the plane. For the first time in years, he felt a sense of clarity. As Jack waited in the airport lounge, he couldn't stop thinking about the events of the flight. He replayed every moment in his mind, the quiet humility Keanu had shown, the acts of kindness, and the grace with which he handled Jack's apology. Jack realized that his behavior had been driven by insecurity. He had tried to bring Keanu down to make himself feel better, but all it had done was reveal his own flaws. He turned to his companion, who was scrolling through her phone. "I think I need to change," he said quietly. She looked up, surprised. "What do you mean?" "I've been judging people unfairly," Jack admitted. "Today, I saw what real kindness looks like. I want to be better." His companion smiled. "It's never too late to start." Weeks later, Jack found himself in a similar situation, on a plane, seated next to a young man who seemed nervous about the flight. This time, however, Jack didn't mock or judge. Instead, he offered a reassuring smile and struck up a friendly conversation. The young man relaxed, grateful for Jack's kindness. It was a small gesture, but it reminded Jack of the impact one person could have. Keanu Reeves had shown him that humility and compassion were far more powerful than arrogance. That lesson stayed with Jack, shaping the way he treated others for years to come. And so, a simple encounter on a flight became a turning point in Jack's life, a reminder that kindness, no matter how small, has the power to change everything.